This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Suburban schools move closer to finally breaking away tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. We are joined tonight by Mike Wisman, Mayor of Arlington. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Greg Ritter, newly elected school board member from the Millington School System. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Also Ken Hoover, returning, this time as a newly elected school board member for the Germantown School System. And also Bill Dries from the Memphis Daily News. So I'll start, we're closer and closer to getting clarity on how the various suburbs that you guys represent in your various ways are breaking away. Arlington, has a signed agreement after what now? A couple years of fighting and legal battles and so on. Are you happy with the deal that you have signed?
It's been said before that anytime you negotiate, you have to bite off something maybe you don't want. And I think through this process, it was a difficult process. It was fragile. There were times I thought it wasn't going to happen, but right now, yes, we're happy with the agreement that we're moving forward with.
Was it more expensive than you thought? I mean, why don't you outline the terms of the agreement just in broad numbers? The
terms of the agreement are we will pay a total of $4 million over 12 years, which breaks down to be $333,000 a year roughly. It does issue the deeds to the buildings to the municipality, but there's a reverter clause in there saying that if we're not an LEA, which is a school system, within 25 years, then those buildings revert back to the Shelby County Schools. But during that time, there's no way for the school board to really dictate how we use the buildings or in that
Right.
issue. So, but we need the buildings, and that's
Right.
what's.
And technically, the money is going towards retirement benefits from Shelby County Schools. It's not really a purchase of the building in terms of the legal ease of
Nothing
this.
is tied. I mean, we made sure that we're clear on that. This is nothing tied to the purchase of the buildings. This is more. There's OPEB requirements, which is
Right.
post-employment benefits,
Right.
health insurance, life insurance,
Right.
that Shelby County and Memphis have underfunded for years and years and years, and they've made some strides forward in the last couple of years. But this helps contribute to those funds.
All right, I want to get back more into the numbers and so on, but let me go around and let me put you on the spot, Bill. Where are we with the various suburbs having signed agreements as we, tape this Friday morning?
Well, all of the 4 agreements that we have are at some part in the pipeline. They're all awaiting approval from the various bodies, and it looks like the final approval for these 4 agreements, Arlington, Lakeland, Bartlett, and Collierville, will probably go to the school boards in those respective school systems as the final step, simply because those school board members take the oath of office starting next month. It looks like in some cases, possibly later this month.
Okay. And Greg, let me bring you all in. Millington has not signed an agreement. I guess you guys are in negotiation for an agreement that
yes.
looks, sounds, and smells similar to the one that Mayor Wisman just described.
Absolutely, yes. We're in negotiations to get our deal
Okay.
with the Shelby County School Board as well.
And what is your sense at this point? I mean, a sense of relief, a sense of, Millington's been fighting this.
It's kind of like Mike said, it's been a long time coming. Anytime you have a compromise, you walk away feeling like there's a little bit left. Nobody's 100% happy with what happens, but at least gives us something to, the sense that things are settled and we can now move forward.
All right. And Ken, you all are in somewhat different shape, and I assume you're in conversation with the school board, the Shelby County School Board, about a deal similar to this. But you've got the whole wrinkle of the 3 schools that the school system wants to hang on to. So, are you discussing both those issues at this time? Is that what has to happen between Germantown and the county schools? It's how the buildings will be transferred, but also what's really going to happen with those 3 schools.
Yeah. So. I think most of the school board members will be installed on December 2nd, and it can't be before December 1st. So I think everybody's going with that Monday, December 2nd. So we don't exist as a school board.
Okay.
We're not a party to the conversation at this point.
Okay.
And the leadership in all of the municipalities, including Germantown, is conducting those negotiations. So yeah, clearly, the city of Germantown the community of Germantown has always said we want all 8 buildings. We would like to continue serving the children that attend school in those buildings. The Superintendent Hobson's proposal or the staff plan said the Unified District needs to keep 3 of those buildings. That's a huge issue, and it's incredibly emotional in Germantown. There's tremendous anxiety around this topic, and how it gets resolved, we still don't know.
Yeah. Bill, let's go ahead with you.
Greg, Millington also has a school in that shape, Lucy Elementary School. The Shelby County School Superintendent Dorsey Hobson has recommended that Shelby County schools keep Lucy Elementary School. Is that, how big of an issue is that for you coming onto the Millington School Board?
Well, it's a big issue for us because the students in Lucy have always been considered Millington kids. And like Ken said about the Germantown kids, we want to continue to educate those kids. Go ahead.
In terms of Arlington and Lakeland, Mayor, once you all have an agreement, maybe before that, you've been talking with Lakeland officials about some kind of shared superintendent. So where is that at this point? Keeping in mind that we still have votes by the county commission and the 2 school boards to come on the agreement itself.
Well, the process for a shared superintendent, that's already in the works. We already have an agreement. We're going through the Tennessee School Board Association for a superintendent search. We do have an agreement set up to where they will interview together, and by the most part, they will hopefully select the same one. If they choose to go separate, they still have that option. But right now, we're choosing for that. I think it's, I've said all along, I thought that all the municipalities could probably share in services and/or superintendent as much as possible to help be efficient, especially if you have someone with the expertise. You know, we've heard John Atkins' name over and over with all the municipalities. There's some areas there for that to make it work. But it has to take, it's going to be up to the school boards to come up with those options. I can sit here and talk about it all day long, but it's going to be the school boards that make those decisions.
Do you think that there are other opportunities beyond a shared superintendent?
Yes. There's we've discussed whether it's contracting together for leasing of buses or however we do our bus services. You can bid together to try to get a better price on a lot of these cleaning services. Security, all kinds of issues. So special ed, some you may want more in-house than outsourcing, but you want to try to keep as many people as you can involved because we hear from teachers all the time since the merge when we'd had this hybrid system, say of busing, the bus system. You have a lot of, before we had all of our bus drivers were in-house. So the principals and the teachers, they got to know the bus drivers and knew that. But with this hybrid system, we sometimes get different bus drivers all the time. That's the first thing we hear is we don't have that same personal approach with our kids that we once had, and that's just in a 1 year's difference. So there's a lot of things that we can try to do together, but especially Arlington and Lakeland's a natural fit. We're more than welcome or willing to talk to anybody. We've said that all along, whether it's Germantown, Collierville, Millington, Bartlett, wherever we can share, I think it makes the most sense. I mean, there's a lot of money that can be saved instead of everybody trying to do everything in-house themselves.
Right. Ken, after the school board elections were decided earlier this month in Germantown, there was some idea that possibly the school board members elect there and the mayor and board of aldermen were not in sync, possibly had some disagreements. What is the relationship? Are there differences?
I don't think there's any difference between the objectives of the administration and the wants and desires of the 5 people that are going to be the school board. We're in sort of an Alice in Wonderland situation where you know who the school board is going to be, but they're not the school board. They can't take any official action. They can't arrive at any conclusions or decisions. A lot of the impression that you're talking about came from an interview with a candidate that lost an election. And you know, those kinds of emotions are incredibly raw. I've been through that. I've lost a hard-fought election. And so I think you have to temper your interpretation of those comments based on the circumstances surrounding it.
What do you think about Mayor Wisman's talk about some kind of shared services? Is that something you think, as a school board, you guys are going to be interested in?
Absolutely. The purpose of creating these local school districts is for local control. And you hear the word breakaway a lot, and that always feels like fingernails on a chalkboard to me. In Germantown, I'll speak for Germantown, we don't think of breaking away, we think of establishing independence. We're going to have a very focused effort on the specific needs of this group of children. So that independence and focus is incredibly important, but there are areas, just as the mayor spoke about, where you don't need that much control, and if there are efficiencies, one that's come up really quickly in this conversation is health insurance, a combined pool to cover the health insurance for the faculty and staff. There's a lot of opportunities where it will make sense. Another one that may make a lot of sense is on the technology side. The APEX system, or the computer system that the Unified District uses to manage the business operations, is very well regarded and requires a fair bit of infrastructure, more than maybe a 4,000 student school district would want to support on its own, but 6 school districts together might very effectively utilize that infrastructure. So I think there's going to be a lot of those kind of conversations.
Do you think there'll be, as someone who said, break away to open the show, and I didn't know that would, I'll have to think about that. But do you think there'll be ways in which you're talking about sharing services, will you do that with the county school in some ways? Or
Unified district.
With the unified district, whatever I get, but with the big school system.
Well, and I don't necessarily like the word unified, but legacy
Right.
NCS, legacy S, we are in, it's a brave new world, right?
Right.
Absolutely. I think that the municipalities, the board that I would serve on, I think would be very open to those kinds of discussions. There is a balance issue. So I spoke about the technology and APEC,
Right.
the ERP system that runs the school district. If the 6 of us are in a shared services agreement with the unified district, there's no balance in that relationship. We're along for the ride, and that may be okay.
Right.
If the 6 suburban municipalities are building a coalition to operate some infrastructure, they're all relatively the same size. It is a team effort.
I gotcha.
So we'll have to see how that dynamic plays out. But at the end of the day, I think all of these municipal boards are going to be very focused on efficiency, particularly in business operations. What is the most efficient and effective way to handle payroll, medical benefits, IT support?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna see if I can interject there for a second, because Ken said something about local control. This is more what it's about, and I agree with that. But one of the things that I want to be clear on when we're talking about shared services or shared superintendent, no matter how much you share, whether it's a superintendent and staff, whether you share services, each board's still going to have their own local control. And that's what I think some of the misconception is amongst new board members coming in, amongst the public is, well, we want we want to isolate ourselves from everybody else, and just be Germantown or just be Millington or just be Arlington. And that's not really the case. The case is you have your own board, no matter what you share. Your board still controls what goes on in your town or your city, your municipality. And beyond that, you just work together collaboratively with the other municipal systems or Shelby County Schools. And so you still have that autonomy.
It's an interesting thing, because some people do say, well, we've just gotten back to where we were. We're back to the city school system and the suburban school system. But that's not really the case, both in the city and in what you're talking about with this very local control and this autonomy. I mean, when you look ahead, are there things you think that the Arlington school system will do on its own than as part of the Shelby County, the old suburban school system? I mean, are there new directions that your school system's going to go in that they couldn't go in as part of the group of, 6 or 7?
Well, I think they'll have that opportunity, probably some opportunities there. I'd say the most part is usually attendance zones. I think that was always an issue with Shelby County, because being such a large system, when we build new schools or they get overcrowded, sometimes you'd have to send children to where they wouldn't. This way you have more control. I mean, like all 5 board members or 7, whichever municipality you're in, those people in that community are going to know who their board members are. They're not going to have just one representing them. And so you're going to have 4 or 5 board members having to go to bat for you instead of one. So when you go to rezoning, it can maybe mean a little more logical sense instead of the big picture and everything spread out, especially with the areas, say, the old rural Cordova, Eads area that was in between Collierville, Germantown, and Arlington and Lakeland. Okay. A lot of those people were pulled. So, yes, it does provide that.
Yeah. Bill.
Greg, how do you think that the Millington School Board is going to view these shared services, the possibility of that?
I think we're open to that. Like Ken said, one of the frustrating things for us is that we're not a school board yet. So when we've had meetings with our transition committee that's been appointed, on one hand, we've said, something has been said, well, that's a school board decision, and then 20 seconds later, it's like, but you're not a school board yet, so you can't decide anything. So we're very excited for December 2nd to come to be installed to where we can actually make some decisions on this. But I think these guys got it right when they talk about it. There's a lot to be said about local control and what we can do within our own boundaries. But Ken said it right when he said that we all want to do what's the most effective for our jurisdiction. So I think working together is the way to go.
Are you confident that that Millington can fund these schools, not just next year, but on an ongoing basis? I mean, Mike Ritz is probably, of the county commission, has probably been the most vocal person who said, look, the estimates that the suburban schools are operating under are not right. I mean, it's going to cost a lot more. Have you, I assume, have looked at the numbers, the kind of preliminary numbers that were put together by the outside consultant, a year or two ago now? And you're an accountant, right?
Right.
Are you comfortable that this is something that Millington can really tackle from a financial point of view?
Yes, we're comfortable that we can do that. We've had SES do our initial study, and we've asked them to update that. But the thing that's difficult for them is that with all these negotiations, nobody really knows what we're going to have yet.
That the ground is shifting.
The ground is shifting, but based on the preliminary numbers that they've given to us and the students that we would have, at least in our reserve annexation areas and within our boundaries, we can do it.
And how many kids from unincorporated Shelby County, give or take, are in Millington schools?
I think probably around 300, 350.
So a pretty small number. Was there, in any part of this negotiation, do you know, was there, or in the deal, well, you guys haven't signed it, I'm thinking you have.
We haven't signed a deal yet.
You haven't yet. Okay, well, let me ask you, Mayor of Arlington, you guys have unincorporated Shelby County kids. Was that part of the legal document of how you're going to handle those kids? And is Arlington guaranteed that they have, no?
And that's what I wanted to kind of correct what he just said. At first, the proposal by Shelby County was to give us or allow us to take the students in our reserve areas. There are some issues there and some problems that we all came back with, saying, well, they are our reserve area. They're still Shelby County. They're still zoned for, like our reserve area is zoned for Bolton and Barrett. So they're not even zoned to schools except for the middle school inside Arlington. But the problem is they're not paying city taxes. They're not paying the fees and everything else that everybody else is associated with. So they don't have representation on the school boards. And so when we went back and talked to the school board, we said the only issue we have is if that becomes a permanent attendance zone of a Bartlett or a Millington or an Arlington, then and there's new laws out there where you may be able to vote on annexation coming up. We may never get the people to vote to annex them, but they're still assured the schools and all that. So what we said is we'd rather handle that through open enrollment. So I think the way Shelby County is now proposing it is anything that's not a municipal boundary is going to be zoned for a Shelby County school. Anything inside a municipal boundary will be zoned for the schools inside there. And then we can address that. Anybody can address that. Same way with the issue in Germantown through open enrollment or through exit grade strategies or grandfathering in policies, however you want to say it.
Okay.
Well, we're still negotiating our deal, so.
Yeah, right.
So
I get confused.
Your deal is set. We're still negotiating our deal. So
Yeah, your attorney's the same one that sat in with us, though. So I know.
You had, the 7 Millington board members had a town hall meeting that I went to at the Civic Center in Millington a couple of weeks ago. And it was very interesting because you had an audience that was mainly teachers, a lot of teachers there. And they had, to my observation, a lot of the same questions and the same anxiety that they did about a year ago when we went into this schools merger, and several of the board members said, you know, we're going to level with you on this. We don't have a lot of the answers right now, but you also said that once the school board is in Millington, that the pace of things getting decided will probably pick up.
Right.
So how much have you been a part of the discussions to date? Because some of the board members were unopposed.
Me personally, well, when we created our transition committee, all the candidates were asked to serve on that committee kind of as an advisory role. So we've all been engaged in that process ever since the last verdict came down that said we could do it. Some of us have been involved since the beginning of this whole thing 3 years ago. And so we've all been very engaged. We've been able to you know, give our advice or what we think, you know, where we would go with certain situations. We just haven't been able to decide anything yet.
Let me go to you, Ken, in the issue of costs and the numbers. Again, we're in this weird place. You don't have your agreement yet, and you haven't even been seated yet. But still, you've looked at the numbers that the consultant, I guess, SES, and are you comfortable that over the long term, Germantown can afford these schools without major increases in the taxes? And I say that against the backdrop of a big property tax increase that Germantown did this last reappraisal year. Is that going to continue as this goes forward? I mean, can it all be done off of sales tax, or are property taxes going to have to start going up to support the schools?
Yeah. So my fundamental answer to that is there's 15,000 school districts in the United States. Every one of those school districts spends the exact same amount of money in this sense, all that they get.
Yeah.
They spend everything they get. Now, it's wildly different in what they get. There are
Right.
school districts in Utah that run on $5,000, $6,000 per pupil. Washington, D.C.'s over $20,000 per pupil. So school boards spend all the money they get. And you can run schools on a shoestring. So Millington, Germantown, all of the suburban communities are going to be able to operate schools on the funding that they have in place. The question is, what level of service are you going to provide? And if you start having student census issues, you know, that can affect that level of service. So in Germantown, I may not ever win another election. I was unopposed this time. I don't believe the citizens of Germantown are fanatical about keeping the property tax rate at this number or that number. They are very, very focused on spending money wisely. So to the extent that our board approaches the citizens of Germantown and says, with this kind of funding, we will deliver these new services, I think there'll be tremendous support. It's just going to be up to us to present the business case that give us this, you get back that.
Right.
I think every time that we successfully deliver on those kinds of exchanges, it'll make it easier to explain the next opportunity. But there's an endless array of opportunities to do new programs. Some of them cost money.
Right.
And I don't anticipate any problem getting community support. 93% of the citizens said, I want a municipal school district. So
And
yeah, I
the
think
vote for the
support will be
sales
there.
tax increase was
Nearly 90%.
Really, nearly. Do you ever hear from residents who, I mean, there were two in very simple stereotypes of why people move to the suburbs. They move, you know, they wanted to get to better schools, and they wanted lower taxes than the city. And you got crime issues, and you got all that kind of stuff. But if you are in a place where the Germantown is increasingly not a low tax community, but still has really good schools, do you worry about that over the long term? And I'm going to ask everyone that if you've got to if your citizens that want more services in the schools that are going to take more taxes, does that hurt the image of Germantown as a low-tax suburb?
Yeah. That won't be a decision made by a Board of Education. It won't be a decision made by a Board of Aldermen. It'll be a decision that evolves from the sentiment of the 40,000 residents
Right.
of Germantown.
Yeah.
So there'll be some discussion of what level of service do you want and what does it cost to deliver that service, and are you convinced that it's being delivered efficiently and effectively? The
Yeah.
money's being well spent. So I don't know how that will pan out. We may operate with the 15 cents, the 2.2 million that's already required by state law. The citizens of Germantown may decide that they want some premium services that cost a little more, and they'll pay for
Right.
that if that's
Yeah.
what they decide.
In Arlington, we have just a couple minutes left. Do you worry about that? I mean, that you're taking on this big big endeavor that the citizens wanted. It entailed a tax increase to get going. Are you worried that now that you have your own school system, people say, hey, we want more computers and we want more fields and we want more, we want all these things that cost money, and then that will hurt Arlington's, image or growth because you're going to have to start raising taxes to support those things?
Well, everybody's always going to have a wish list, and there's always going to be naysayers on either side. So, as a town perspective, yes, raising taxes is always going to be an issue anytime you talk about it. But there's also people that want the services, that want the amenities. But we're already seeing, just after the economic downturn, we're already seeing growth in Arlington, probably more than most of the other communities right now, because we have a lot of room to grow. We have apartments. We have first apartments really coming in. We have several new developments, not existing ones. But so that is, we're very sought after, I guess, right now. We have good schools. We have a lot of room to grow. We're the youngest community in the state. We have more children per household than most across the state. So For Arlington, we love the potential of it. The schools are going to produce more and more growth than probably what we can imagine. But in the long term, when it comes down to talking about money, when it talks about raising taxes, that's always going to be an issue no matter who you talk to.
Yeah. And last to you, I mean, do you hear from residents, neighbors, people in Millington saying, look, this is great, local control of the schools, but let's not go down this road of ever increasing taxes to continue to fund the schools now that we have them?
Well, the residents in Millington are very scared. And if you look at the votes that we had, of course, we were the last as far as, 76% and 24%. A lot of that has to do with our demographics and that, we're an old retiree community. We've had a Navy base for there, and a lot of people loved Millington, and they've retired there, and that's what, that's where they live, and they're on fixed incomes. So that's kind of led, in my opinion, to some of the votes that are there. But I think if, like Ken said, if we can deliver, and once they see the results of what we're able to do in Millington, if they want more services, we just have to be open with them and say, okay, here's the money that we have. If we want this, it's going to cost this. We can either raise taxes or we can do something else. It might cost us in some other area, but
And what was the vote in Millington on the sales tax? I mean, roughly, it was more like a 60% in favor, right? It wasn't the overwhelming.
It was like 67.
Right, which reflects. Okay, so it's still pretty high. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you all for being here. That's all the time we have this week. Thank you, and thank you for joining us. Good night.